Hello Rebel and welcome back to my life. I did get a new office, thanks for noticing. So let's have a quick follow-up chat about last week's video where I talked about the Wheel of Time and my original post about it, and then Daniel Greene's follow-up video on my post. And again, as I said in last week's video, everything that I'm saying here is my opinion and should not be taken as a hard statement of fact. I said last week that the main thing that Daniel Greene seemed to take issue with in what I said in my article was my statement on Robert Jordan's intentions as I interpreted them when I was reading the Wheel of Time. Specifically, Daniel seemed upset that I thought Jordan wanted, on some level, to leave his work unfinished or to not have completed it by the end of his life. Daniel seems to think, and anyone is entitled to think this, that for Jordan to intentionally not finish his series would be a betrayal of his readers and his fans. And a lot of the comments I received on last week's video were in the same vein. One reader said that I was showing Robert Jordan pure disrespect, and another person said that I was making an attack on Robert Jordan's character. Daniel Greene himself, in his video, referred to my original post on Medium as a character assassination. And this specific point is what I've been thinking about the most since this whole topic got resurrected by Daniel's video and subsequent posts or comments on my article and my video. Because to me, when I wrote that post, Jordan's intentions were the least important part of what I had to say. Every other point I listed was more important to me and a more valid criticism than Jordan's seeming intention to open up more and more plot threads while closing hardly any of them. But to many people who have criticized my article or last week's video, Jordan's intentions seem to be the most important part, and the thing that they're most upset about, especially in Daniel's case. And I think I've finally figured out why this is. It's an idea that intentionally not finishing a series is a wrong act, something immoral, something unethical, whatever you want to call it. So let's talk about this, and let's assume, just hypothetically and for the purpose of this video, that I am correct in my assumption and my estimation of Jordan's intention, at least on some level, to leave his work unfinished. Is that a moral failing on his part? Is that a bad act? Is that a negative statement on his character? See, I don't think it is, and I didn't think it was when I wrote my post about it. And right up front, I'm not trying to prove Jordan's intentions here. I'm not trying to say that I'm right about what he intended, because as I pointed out last week, that is impossible. You can't know another person's intentions for certain. Even if they say their intentions are one thing, their actual intentions might be something very different. I mean, just look at, like, all of politics. And besides, even if we do say that the author's own words can be used as an indicator of their intentions, in the actual About the Author section of the Wheel of Time novels, Jordan himself said he has been writing since 1977 and intends to continue until they nail shut his coffin. Which I think allows a reader some ambiguity of thought when it comes to Jordan's intentions towards his own work. But again, I'm not trying to nail down Jordan's actual 100% true intentions here, because that's impossible. What I'm talking about here is the argument that by stating Jordan's intentions to be this way, I'm saying that he did something immoral, or I'm making some nasty or judgmental comment towards him. Now, I have a different viewpoint on this, partially because I myself am an author, and I think authors are allowed to do whatever they want with their book series, and that includes leaving them unfinished. I mean, my favorite author of all time is Tolkien, and Tolkien left most of his work unfinished, and I do not fault him for that. Before he died, the thing he was working on hardest was the Silmarillion, but even to say he was working hard on that kind of overstates it a little bit. Because Tolkien famously got sidetracked all the time. He would jump from one work to another, and then he would leave it all behind and go work on his more academic projects for a while before finally coming back to whatever he was working on at the time. And guess what? That was his right as an author. I don't begrudge him that aspect of the way that he created. George R. R. Martin is another example of an author who, while I'm not sure or don't necessarily get the idea that he wants to leave his work unfinished, he has to have come to terms with the fact that at his current pace of production, it might not be done before he dies. But I don't fault him for that, and I very much subscribe to the idea that, as John Anialio says, George R. R. Martin is not your bitch. Yes, as a reader, I have grown slightly disillusioned with A Song of Ice and Fire, similar to the way that I felt about The Wheel of Time when I was reading it, but it's not to the same degree, and that is because I think that if you are going to write a long book series like Jordan or Martin and face the possibility that it might not ever be finished, you have to make your readers enjoy the series regardless every step of the way. Martin continues to do that. that for me for the most part. Jordan, as you can probably guess from literally everything I've said, does not do that at all. My annoyance with The Wheel of Time and the reason I quit the series doesn't stem only from the fact that I thought it was too long or that I thought Jordan wanted to keep writing it forever. Star Wars will go on forever, and I love it. The Marvel Universe will go on forever, and I love it. There's nothing wrong with creators telling a big, grand story that they know they themselves will never finish. But I felt that The Wheel of Time was artificially extending itself, not in a way that delivered on the promises and the premises of the original novel, but in a way that was simply intended to make the series longer and longer in a way that just wasn't interesting to me. That is the unforgivable sin to me as a reader, not the length of a series or the fact that an author intends their story to go on until or even past the end of their life. Let's take another big fantasy author who I think is doing it right, Robin Hobb. Hobb has created and continues to create a huge fantasy universe with multiple long storylines and a vast, incredible array of characters. However, what's rare about the way that Hobb does it is that her universe is constructed in a series or a collection of trilogies. And yes, longtime Underrealm readers will just have said, aha! By building the world this way, Hobb tells a series of complete stories, all of which add up to a much larger, much more complex and epic narrative. Every installment is enjoyable on its own, even as they all together construct a tapestry that could easily be unfinished by the end of her life. But Hobb could die tomorrow and her books would be fine. Although I really hope she doesn't, because I want to read more of them. And that just isn't a feeling that I got from The Wheel of Time, like at all. As I said in my Medium article and last week's video and a bunch of other places that I've talked about this in videos or posts online, The Eye of the World was one of my favorite fantasy novels at the time I read it. And as is the case with every author's debut novel or a new novel in a series, I think that that book was written and published with Jordan having no idea of whether or not it was going to be successful or whether the publisher would want more and to continue the series. And for that reason, it was a truly great story all on its own. It held the promise of more, but even if it hadn't been successful, even if the publisher hadn't wanted to continue the series, that would still be a great book. But after the book was successful and after the publisher did continue with the series, I feel like Jordan got less interested in making each book an enjoyable experience on its own, but as part of a larger whole, and more on just extending the series as long as he possibly could. So the way that I interpret that reading experience is that he wanted the series to continue until and even past the end of his life. But I don't make a moral judgment about that. I don't think that it's an evil act. I see that as something that influenced his writing, something that became annoying to me as a reader and turned it into a very different reading experience from the first book. That's all. And you could take that as the entirety of my criticism, that as the series progressed, it felt like each book dragged more and more, and after enjoying the first book tremendously, I enjoyed each subsequent book less and less, until it became a slog that brought me no joy, and I quit. To me, that is saying the same thing with different words. Whether I attribute an intention to Jordan or not, the reading experience is the same, and to me, it's not a big deal to attribute that intention to him because it's not an evil intention. If I were looking at a scale of bad to good, I would place that intention right in the middle. It is morally neutral. But if you view that intention as evil, then fine, take it out of the equation. The only thing I really care about is the reader experience, and the reader experience is the same whether you attribute it to an intention or not. Because to my mind, in life as well as in art, intention matters very little when compared to actual results. When someone does something harmful, it doesn't matter if their intentions were good, and if a reading experience is bad, it's bad regardless of what the author's intentions were. If intentions mattered as much as results, then every book would be the greatest book of all time, and every film would be the greatest film ever made. Because everyone sets out trying to write the best book or make the best movie that they possibly can. But I do think that guessing at or trying to glean an author's intentions can be useful insofar as it helps us contextualize and understand what we've read and why we liked it or didn't. But because author intent is one of, if not the least important part of the discussion, I don't see a problem with saying, this reads like it was written by someone who intended to write until they nailed shut his coffin. And oh look, that's exactly what he says in his author's note too. That's all I got for you today, Rebel. Hope you enjoyed this video. This whole discussion has given me lots of thoughts about lots of of things, I tell you what. An extra special shout out to my patrons who are scrolling below my face. If you want to be one of those awesome and incredibly attractive individuals, click on my Patreon link in the description below. I appreciate you watching, and I will try to see you next Friday. Maybe. Bye!